With Valentine's Day season already here, I wanted to look back at all the crushes and lovers of the Smith family and pick out the perfect person or thing that each of them should ask to be their Valentine this year. From crows to actual planets, Rick stands out as the most questionable of the family in terms of love interests. Rick had a fascination for technology and inventing at a young age. Because of this, he most likely spent a large part of his youth making gadgets and staying indoors, so he wouldn't have really had the chance or the desire to meet that many women. That would all change when Rick met his wife, Diane. Rick and Diane's relationship was amazing. They both were smart individuals who belonged together. Diane was nothing but supportive of Rick's career.
Did you make a breakthrough?
In flashbacks where we see Rick with Diane, he is happier than ever. Clearly, Rick and Diane were soulmates, except the two of them never got to live out their lives together because one day, Rick finally discovered the secrets to portal travel when he was approached by Rick Prime, who offered to make him the most powerful being across all universes, to which Rick declined. Rick Prime did not accept that answer at all, and unfortunately, that decision would lose Rick his original daughter and his wife. The loss of Diane would tear Rick apart. He spent nearly his whole life trying to get both her back and kill the Rick responsible for her death. Rick's whole life changed after the death of his wife. He fell into alcoholism and severe depression. Diane's death is what sparked Rick to become who he is and be so intelligent. If Diane were to have lived, Rick would have probably never entered a portal in his whole life. They would have had a happy family life, but of course, that wasn't possible. The worst part for Rick is that he was never able to let her go. We see throughout the show the various ways Rick tries to deal with his trauma, whether that's forcing him to relive it or trying to get rid of it completely. Rick is eventually able to moderately overcome his feelings when he is able to track down Rick Prime and beat him to death with his own fists. He was able to wash out the trauma, but it still left a huge stain on who he is. To me, Rick's dedication to Diane is the clear-cut definition of true love. Unfortunately for Rick, he can't find that kind of love again, so over the years, he's had to jump into many chaotic and ephemeral relationships, like his relationship to Unity. Unity, I would say, is the last of Rick's relationships where he actually had a real connection, and not a relationship purely based off lust. Rick showed real emotions when he lost Unity, and Unity actually wanted to see Rick do well. Unity and Rick's relationship was not healthy because their relationship thrived when all of Rick's attention went to her. Rick was a bad influence on her, and she was a bad influence on him. Rick's desire to non-stop party and Unity's goal to control the world conflicted with each other, and that meant their relationship wasn't viable. Not only that, but their relationship left Summer and Morty out of the picture, and also almost even cost them their lives. Rick and Unity definitely could have thrived better when Unity was a small hive mind and Rick wasn't a family man yet, but in this current timeline, they just don't belong together, and they wouldn't work. Rick's next relationship was a very short-lived one with Princess Ponita, heir to the throne of the Chud Kingdom. Their relationship is more of a what-if, and something we never really see except for her saving Rick and their unnamed child they had together. Rick also had a relationship with an entire planet named Gaia that was just as short. Despite him and Gaia having children together, Rick only cared about taking care of them because he was able to spend time with Beth, and therefore the relationship with Gaia was very minimal to Rick. Rick also had a few hour-long relationship with Daphne, an alien Rick met when partying with Summer on planets that were about to die. Rick and Daphne hit it off right away, and Rick even thought that there were some sparks of love, but she ended up using him so that she could survive her own planet's death. Rick most recently went out with an alien named Bug Ann, who was revealed to be his girlfriend at the end of the most recent season. Bug Ann and Rick seem to have some good chemistry, but we ultimately don't know that much about their relationship. Although almost all of his relationships are weird, they definitely get weirder. Rick agreed to get Morty a dragon one episode, and he originally disliked the idea of a dragon. However, later on when Rick got to know the dragon, he and that dragon connected so well they became soul bonded with each other. This was a really weird episode about Rick, the dragon, Summer, and Morty, and I think that we can confidently say that there was no love here. Rick also had a strange connection with his former sidekicks, two crows. Rick and these crows never had a typical relationship, but even Rick hinted at there being a stronger metaphor for a relationship.
At least adventuring was just a metaphor for romantic partnership, so it's not a real breakup.
Rick definitely has a weird type, whether it's giant pieces of rock, aliens, hive minds, or his one true love, Diane. I think if Rick were to be the most happy with someone he can actually physically date, it would be his girlfriend Bug Ann. If you ask me, Rick's Valentine this year should definitely be her, not just because they are currently dating, but because of the potential their relationship has, and how it seems like the both of them enjoy themselves when in each other's company. Morty has also had his fair share of love interest. His most famous crush is Jessica. Since the very first episode of the show, Morty has always had a huge crush on Jessica. Morty eventually leads to the complete destruction of his home world by trying to get Jessica to fall in love with him. So Morty is seen with Jessica at a dance, and in another episode, he and Jessica hang out and try and watch a movie. Unfortunately for Morty, Jessica just doesn't like the real Morty. She only even talks to him to get something out of it, whether that's when Morty had some sort of fame or like when he had wine. Morty just isn't appealing to Jessica, and that was made painfully obvious. Jessica dumps Morty on a date after his newfound charisma was too much for her. Eventually, Morty meets an older woman named Stacy, who he quickly wins over. However, that doesn't last long because she gets wrapped up in a typical Rick and Morty mess. That same episode, Morty dates another older woman named Jacqueline, who was in love with the person Morty became. However, all three relationships from this episode were bound to fail, especially since the last two are significantly older than Morty. Morty has also had a few other crushes besides Jessica, like Arthricia, a girl from the Purge planet who Morty drastically failed to win over. Morty's crush was not mutual with Arthricia, but he did have a brief connection with Annie, a girl that worked on Rick's Anatomy Park. Rick sized her down into a tube before Morty could even ever have a real relationship with her, unfortunately. In season 1, Morty had a child with a reproducing alien robot, but I think that would definitely not meet the requirements for a relationship. Instead, Morty only ever had two official relationships. Back when Morty was able to control his life with a button, with a built-in checkpoint system, he is having the time of his life, living through his wildest dreams until he meets a nice girl. Now, unfortunately, we never learn her name, but her and Morty get along well and quickly begin to date. Things go really well for the two of them until they don't. They get in a big argument and break up, but thankfully Morty wins her back by getting them tickets to go on a trip together. This whole time Morty is in love and doesn't think to use his button because there's nothing he needs to go back on. Since he never used his button, the save with him before meeting her is still loaded, and when Jerry is dumb enough to use it as the living room remote, Morty's perfect relationship vanishes in front of his eyes. Even though this relationship was perfect for Morty, it has been ultimately erased from everyone's mind but himself, so he was just unable to get back into her life, but instead he had to live with the loss of the relationship. A relationship people will definitely remember is Planetina. Her and Morty have the perfect love for one another until people try and take it away. Morty, being who he is and hanging out with Rick, decides to go and take these people's lives away. Morty is cold-blooded this whole episode, but later on when he sees the bad side of Planetina, he decides to break things off. I've always thought Morty's reasons for breaking up with her were a lot less serious than he made it seem, especially since he had to do bad things just to be with Planetina. With all that being said, based off their connection, availability, and potential, I think Planetina is Morty's best match because they complement each other so well. I hope Morty finds more of a real love, but for now Planetina and him are good together. The rest of the family has a far less complicated love life, like Summer, who dated Ethan on and off throughout the show, but their relationship sucked the whole time, with Ethan cheating on Summer and being constantly bad to her. Summer also dates an older man named Hemorrhage. This is also a short relationship, and they end up fighting a lot, and Summer leaves him, but they definitely had a very solid connection. Summer also had a bunch of random relationships with strangers after being brainwashed by an app to mindlessly fall in love with people. None of these were any bit real love, and we can't for sure say if any of those relationships reflect Summer's interests. Summer did have a few crushes though. None of these crushes really liked her back, so she was stuck admiring them in the shadows. If I were Summer, I would try and make things work with Hemorrhage. It seems they had feelings for each other the most, and maybe in a non-post-apocalyptic world, Summer and Hemorrhage would thrive together. If there's a Hemorrhage out there in Summer's universe, maybe they're perfect for each other. And finally, there's Beth and Jerry. They are almost always fighting whenever they are together, and it's almost always Rick's fault. Because of their struggles, they both have had different partners. When Jerry and Beth spent some time divorced, Jerry met Kiara, an alien on Earth hunting for prey. Jerry was loving the relationship, but his kids weren't. Jerry wrapped them up in his mess and eventually had to get them all out. The relationship wasn't going to work out well, especially since Jerry is human and he has kids to take care of. Beth also had a unique partner in herself. She fell in love with what could be a clone or the real version of herself. This left the entire family traumatized, and yet Jerry eventually was okay with it. Their relationship seemed to have fizzled out. Jerry also had two hidden affairs, both with men. While an alien parasite, Jerry and Sleepy Gary fell in love with each other, and despite it not being real at the end, it felt totally real on Jerry. Jerry, also jealous of what Beth and her clone got up to, tried to do the same, but he couldn't stomach going all the way. However, both Beth and Jerry did sleep with Mr. Nimbus, one of Rick's oldest and closest rivals. Despite their many problems, I think Beth and Jerry deserve each other, and they have definitely shown real signs that they deeply love one another. With the whole family being done, thank you for watching. Let me know what you thought of the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have an amazing Valentine's Day.